I'm Erin and welcome to the Cardboard Republic. We have a +5 range video for you. That is a video in which we take some of the games that you have played, probably, and have loved, maybe, and suggest alternate titles that are a little bit more off the beaten path. We try to go with games that are put out by smaller independent publishers, as well as games that are maybe a little bit older. So this month, our theme is licensed IP games. That means games that have pulled their theme from some other big intellectual property universe, like, we'll get into it, but spoiler, Ghostbusters. Our first game is Firefly.
Take my love, take my land, take me where I cannot stand. I don't care, I'm still free. You can't take the sky from me.
Firefly is a space western written by Joss Whedon and put out on Fox. It lasted for 1 season and has remained in our hearts ever since. It has a huge cult following. Firefly, the game, is a pick up and deliver game with very minimal player interaction. So that means you spend most of the game going from planet to planet, fulfilling contracts, getting money, getting goods, dropping off goods, smuggling stuff, so on and so forth. But there isn't a whole lot of stuff you can do with other players. That's probably the biggest complaint about the game. It can also be a little long, but that's probably the biggest complaint about the game. I happen to kind of like it for that same thing, and I know a lot of other players do as well. We decided to pick Xia, Legends of a Drift System, as our alternative for Firefly. Xia has that same thing where you're picking up and delivering things in space, but it has a little more depth to it. You are improving your ship, you're becoming a better captain, you're building your business. In Firefly, all you're really doing is moving from planet to planet, trying to get some more money, and trying to fulfill whatever scenario you have picked for that particular game. There's no real, long-term plan in Firefly beyond surviving, which I guess is thematically appropriate, but in Xia, you really have to plan ahead, and you have to thrive instead of just survive, which I think adds, 1, more depth, and 2, a more interesting challenge. So if you haven't tried Firefly, the game, and you're a fan of Firefly, definitely try that first. And then if you like it, move on to Xia, see what you think about that one. I happen to love pick up and deliver games, so both of these are right up my alley, but the added stuff in Xia, really long title, is what is gonna keep me going back to that one, whereas Firefly is a game I maybe play once a year now. Our next game is Battlestar Galactica. BSG is a TV show from the 70s that was remade in the 2000s. It's all about the last of humanity escaping these robots. In the more modern version of the show, which is the one that I'm more familiar with, the robots look like humans. They've been designed to mimic everything about humans. Usually they don't even know that they're Cylons. In the game of Battlestar Galactica, that takes the form of a really intense trader mechanic. So you have all of the players acting like they're humans. Some of the players actually are. Some of the players are Cylons. And the Cylons have their own special objective. The humans have their own special objective. So ultimately, while there are other components to the game, what everyone really tends to remember is who was the traitor and how did they reveal themselves and how did the game go from there. So we decided to take that aspect and bring it into our alternative game. Our alternative game is Redacted. This is a spy game, so it takes that same idea of you don't necessarily know who's on your team and really, really amplifies it. In Redacted, all of the players are partygoers and spies who have been invited to this giant big fancy soiree. While they are there, they're trying to get as many clues, secret files, information, so on and so forth, then get to the roof and escape via helicopter, or sabotage the other player's helicopter, however you want to do it. It takes that aspect of trying to figure out who's on your team and who's not on your team, and trying to give hints but not be too subtle. And then the biggest part about these games is knowing when to reveal yourself. So if you're the spy or the Cylon, you have to time it really well. If you reveal yourself too early, then you're not going to be able to achieve your objective because everyone will just know that you're the Cylon. If you reveal yourself too late, then you've bought into the human cause for so long and you've given them so much support along the way that it might be too late. There's a different strategy for every single game, for every playthrough, depending on the other players, depending on the scenario, depending on the weather sometimes, or my mood. So I love that Redacted has that same sort of thing where you're trying to figure out what's going on and who's on your team, but it does it in a slightly different setting, and it gets rid of some of the extra stuff that's going on in the Battlestar Galactica game. Next up, we have Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is based on the Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. Regardless of which type of media you're looking at for this one, it's all about these feuding families vying for power on the continent of Westeros. Every family has its own internal political intrigues, as well as some really, really brutal machinations going on in order to get the throne of the whole place. In Game of Thrones, the game, you have a kind of similar thing where every player takes on the role of one of these families, and there's a lot of alliances made and then broken, a lot of backstabbing. It's one of those games you can lose friends over. There is a little bit of resource management, but primarily your mechanic is diplomacy, however you want to define diplomacy. As an alternative for Game of Thrones, we decided to take this in two very different routes. So first, if you love the heavy political aspect of Game of Thrones, but you wish it was meatier, you wish that it lasted longer, that there was more for you to do and sink your teeth into, then we're going to suggest The Virgin Queen. This is a game that can last for like 5 hours, so be prepared. Game of Thrones can also last a while, but usually around 3 hours and you're good. In The Virgin Queen, you have that same sort of thing where you are vying for political power during the reign of Queen Elizabeth. The difference is, one, the length, and two, it's set during a real era in history, which is kind of cool just to bring that in. If you like the Game of Thrones game, but maybe the backstabbiness sometimes makes you a little uncomfortable, we are going to suggest Chicken Caesar. This, totally opposite side of the spectrum, is another political game, but you're all chickens. You're playing out electing Caesar of ancient Rome, but as chickens. So the thing is, even if you're backstabbing each other, even if it gets pretty brutal and people get, oh gosh, I almost had feathers ruffled. Okay, even if people get a little angry, you're chickens. You can't really lose a friend over that time your rooster decided to get mad at his rooster because you wanted to be Caesar and he wouldn't let you. That's just not a thing that ruins good friendships. So, we decided that depending on what you like about the Game of Thrones game, you could go either way on this one. You could even go both. But either way, we think that Game of Thrones is a good game, and these two, in their own little ways, improve upon it. Then we have the Ghostbusters.
Ghosts.
Hello, Ghostbusters.
They're real.
You do?
They're mean.
You have?
They're here.
The Ghostbusters, I feel silly even describing who the Ghostbusters are right now because it's such a pop culture moment for them. But the Ghostbusters are a team of ghost hunters based out of New York City. They devise wacky technology to hunt ghosts, trap ghosts, save the city, all in a day's work. They have really great secretaries. The Ghostbusters game is like basically the same thing. It's a cooperative game in which you are trying to save, in this case the board, from a bunch of ghosts. It's scenario based and each scenario builds upon the last one, so you do have some sort of sense of progression as you move through the game. We decided to take the cooperative nature of the game and that sense of progression that you get and find something similar. So, we're going to suggest Shadowrun Crossfire as the alternate to Ghostbusters. Shadowrun is set in the Shadowrun universe. It has that same sort of city feel, even though it's like a weird future cyberpunk, magic punk setting. You are playing as a team, only instead of being strictly scenario-based, you get progression in how you develop your characters from game to game. You play the same character over and over and over again, and at the end of each game, you get additional abilities that can help you in the next game. It's not quite like Pandemic Legacy or something like that, where everything changes from game to game, but there is enough there that if you've played a few times, you do have that sense of having built something, having completed something before, and that is helping you now. That's what we wanted to carry over from Ghostbusters, and so that's why we think Shadowrun is a good choice. Our last final game is Lord of the Rings.
Legend tells of a ring created by an ancient evil that gave its wearer the power to enslave the world. Believed lost for centuries, it has now been found.
Is it secret? Is it safe?
So the Lord of the Rings IP, as you probably know, is a story about a bunch of small men who go for a really long walk. In Lord of the Rings, you have the hobbits who are trying to destroy the ring by bringing it to the big volcano, and it takes forever, and it's really overly complicated, and there are a lot of trees, and there are battles that are really poorly described, and there are bushes that are really over-described. But it is an iconic part of most of nerd childhood. I really do love The Lord of the Rings. I love the world. I love even more to make fun of it. So the Lord of the Rings game, not that one, not that one, no, the other one. Yes, okay. The Lord of the Rings game, this one, is based on the pre-Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings era. It's all about players working cooperatively to destroy the ring. It's played over this whole long series of boards, which is actually a really innovative mechanic. And you have to move along the board trying to outrun different things and not get Sauron to take the ring. It's Lord of the Rings. The story is the same every time, no matter what version it is. We decided to suggest, as an alternative, Robinson Crusoe. So Robinson Crusoe, for me, is also an interminable slog over and over again, just full of death and a lack of success. I'm sort of kidding. I'm just a little bitter because I have never beat Robinson Crusoe because it's a pretty difficult game. What we really wanted to take from Lord of the Rings into Robinson Crusoe, though, is that aspect of cooperative play, that aspect of storytelling that you really get a good sense of from the Lord of the Rings game, which is impressive in and of itself, that really carries over to Robinson Crusoe. In Robinson Crusoe, you play through different scenarios, always trying to survive on the island, fighting bears and gorillas and surviving outside and running out of food and discovering different mountains. It's really fun. I love Robinson Crusoe. But you still get that sense of story that I think is at the heart of both of these games. So if you like that Lord of the Rings game and not the other Lord of the Rings games that are irrelevant right now, if you like that one, try Robinson Crusoe. And if you win it, I don't want to hear it. Okay, those are 5 really great licensed IP games, as well as 6, I guess technically, really awesome alternatives. We love doing +5 range videos because it's super fun to look through our collection and look online and try to find these indie or older games that give you that same feeling that that original game gave you while changing it up enough to keep you interested. So I hope that we did that successfully. If you have any other titles that you would suggest as alternates for the games that we listed here, please leave a comment down below because I would personally love to hear it. I kind of adore most of the games that we talked about today. So if you have any that are like them, I want to know. And as always, like and subscribe. And if you are interested in our content and want to see more of it, just check out our Patreon. We'll leave a link down below. Thanks.